Hey team, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Cole and I'm a furniture flipper based in Christchurch, New Zealand. I enjoy injecting tired furniture with a modern spin. I'm learning as I go, I make mistakes, I have a few terrible habits, but I work really hard to get the best results I can for the piece that I'm working on. So thanks for joining me and let's jump straight into it. I picked up this piece at a local garage sale for about $20. It is in pretty rough condition, but it's got a lot of potential. I love the style, so I'm ready to give it a red hot crack. It is veneer over what looks like a particle board. There's a couple of drawers that are solid timber on the front, but everything else is veneer, which is in really poor condition. There's a lot of really deep scratches, some chips, bits of it just sort of broken off. The top and the ends are in the worst condition. Lots of scratches, heaps of stains, all sorts going on, so it'll be interesting to see what that looks like after a good sand. So I always like to start my projects by basically removing any kind of drawers, anything that can come apart. I'll take it apart, I'll have a good look over it, make sure I haven't missed anything, make sure there's no bugs like borer eating away at the wood, missing parts, anything that's going to cause me some kind of chaos further down the track. I'd like to know about it now, but don't get me wrong, there are always surprises. And then I will remove any hardware, take to it with a vacuum, give it a good clean up, spray and wipe it over, and by that stage I'm hoping that I'll have a bit of an idea on what direction I want to take the project. So here I'm just removing the base. I'm using a battery operated drill. You could use a screwdriver for this, you don't need to have a drill. It might take you a little bit longer, a little more elbow grease, but it will do exactly the same job. Now put those screws you remove into a safe place and reuse them later. There's honestly no point in buying new screws. You don't generally see them. If they work, reuse them. They will do the job. Now I thought that these screws inside the drawer were actually holding the handle on, but it turns out they weren't. They were just hanging about doing nothing. Perhaps they were used for something else in the past. But these handles were glued in with some really hard out glue. So I just used a chisel to sort of pry it out. Once I'd got that first one out, I kind of realized what technique I needed to use and the rest popped out pretty easily. Once cleaned up, I was pretty happy with how everything was looking. It was all looking pretty straight. My main concern were the scratches and the stains, so until I take to it with sandpaper, I'm still actually not sure where I'm going with this. Now with plenty of confidence, I take to this drawer face with 60 grit sandpaper, which was an absolute mistake. It was too coarse for this. I didn't want to burn through the veneer. I did. I probably should have started with 100 or 120, but these are the mistakes that we hopefully learn from. It is really important to wear a mask when you are sanding. I would spend a little bit of money on a good quality mask. Don't wear those kind of material COVID things. They're not going to do anything. I also attach a shop vac just to get as much dust as I can into it. It helps with the cleanup and I think it is better for your health. And there's the veneer that I'm going to have to repair. If you don't have an orbital sander or a palm sander, you can just use sandpaper. It is a little bit harder on the body, but I do find that manual sanding does get you better results. You don't get the little squiggly lines that you might get with an orbital sander. So yeah, if you don't have one, grab some sandpaper and go for gold. I am super happy with how these drawers have come up. The only issue I've got is the solid wood on the left is darker than the veneer on the right, so that is something I'll address. As you can see, the top of this is not a happy camper. Lots of scratches and stains. So I will sand it and hope for the best. I would like to keep this veneer natural, but it's not looking promising. And there I am, taking note of the lesson I learned recently, changing that 60 grit for 100. After a quick sand, I realised I could use the scraper just to get a lot of that varnish off. It came off quite easily and it meant that I didn't have to sand for as long. I'm about to tackle the ends, which do have the really deep scratches. My main concern is that the scratches have gone through the veneer or are very close to. I don't want to have to remove the veneer because I will have to put something else back down to get that smooth surface. So I'll give it a sand and see how we go. Good news folks, the scratches did not go through the veneer and I have managed to sand down to a nice smooth surface. Now that everything's sanded back, I can kind of take a look, see what needs to happen. The drawers, awesome, very happy with those. They'll look great with some varnish and a bit of wax on there. But the casing itself does still have some really bad stains. I would have to go at this with chemicals, it would take a long time, blow the budget. So I'm not going to. I've decided to paint this. I think it's the best option for now. With that said, I don't just want to paint it and be done with it. I'd like to add a little bit of detail to the ends just for that little bit of something something. So I'm going to add a little bit of a frame around the outside with some pine trim just to give it a little bit of character. Before I get started on the trim, I'm just going to use some filler to fix up any of the chips in the veneer. I picked up this half round pine from the local hardware store, in this case it was Bunnings. This comes in lots of different sizes, so depending on your project you can buy accordingly. Before making any cuts, get those safety goggles on. Using the miter saw, I cut a nice clean 45-degree angle. You won't need to use a clamp, but I'm just using it because one hand is filming and the other hand has the felt pen in it. But you can lay it down and then measure it out so that you get a nice accurate measurement. To help with any splintering in the pine, you can use painter's tape, wrap it around the pine, cut through the tape, and you'll find that you'll get a much cleaner cut. One of my favourite products to use is Shelley's liquid nails. I'm sure there's other brands out there. I actually use it quite a few times in this project. It's a really affordable option for gluing things together, and I find that it's extremely reliable. Some people might use a brad nailer to attach these to the piece. I find that pine's extremely lightweight, durable, so I don't need to. I just use the liquid nail and that's enough for me. And while that's drying, I decide to tackle the colour of the drawers. I want them to be the same colour, so I've gone for a Cabot's interior stain, and this one is crabwood. I really liked the colour in the shop on the piece of timber they had there, so fingers crossed it comes up similar on this piece. Okay, so I have fallen deeply in love with this product. I'm loving how it's bringing out the grain in the wood, but also it just goes for ages. So I've dipped that once and I've done like half of the drawer and it looks awesome. And I'm finding that when I stop and start, I'm not getting kind of bizarre colouring. It's just blending really, really nicely. Highly recommend it. Time to sand these handles down. After losing half the skin on my fingers, I have finally got them ready for painting. I wasn't too sure if I was going to paint the base or keep it natural, so I've decided to sand this leg, which is the most damaged, to see how it comes up, and then I'll make a decision. I'm pretty happy with how that's looking, so I'm going to keep it natural and get on with sanding the rest of the frame. It's been 84 years and I'm still sanding this frame. And now a nice quick repair job with me old favourite Shelley's liquid nails. Anyone would think I was a Shelley's brand ambassador, because here is another Shelley's product that I use, No More Gaps. This is something we've used a lot in our house for the panelling we've put up. It's very easy to use. It can be a little bit messy, especially if you're sort of first time filling gaps, but to be fair, I've done it heaps and I'm still very messy. You don't have to do this, but I find if I want a really smooth paint job, this just helps. It fills all the gaps, and it means that there's no gap between the panelling and the wood. That can look a little bit cheap, so take the time. It is messy, like I said, but it's absolutely worth it. Now here's a prime example of my accuracy. If you need to find the longest distance between 2 points, just ask Cole to draw a straight line. Time to get a bit of polish on these drawers. I use Gillies polish. I find that it leaves a really nice satin smooth finish, and it smells absolutely amazing. Now that the liquid nail's dried for the pine trim, it's time to get sanding. You can spend as long or as little amount of time on this, but I really encourage you, if you think it needs a little bit more, just keep going. You'll be rewarded when you do the paint job. The smoother this is, the better the paint will look. And it is prime time, but before I do that, I grab a brush, give it a good brush over, and then a clean wet cloth and give it a good wipe down. Just get as much of that dust off as you can. Once the primer's dry, I will go over it really lightly with a 120 sandpaper, just to really smooth it out. I'm not using anything fancy here to apply the paint. I've just got a nice soft bristle paintbrush. I think it was about $6, and I really prefer a foam roller. This roller, maybe it's $8. It can be reused so long as you wash it, look after it, but I find it gives me a really nice smooth finish. I haven't used Porter's paint before, but they've got a really nice display in the Bunnings by my house, so I thought, why not give it a go? This is just a test pot, so I'm thinking I probably will need a second test pot to complete this project. Now with my painting technique, I'm not saying it's right and I'm not saying it's wrong, it's just what works for me. The first coat I do, I just make sure I'm covering the whole thing in a really even manner. It doesn't matter if it looks patchy, that will be fixed up later, but I just want it extremely smooth, so I work in sections along the piece to make sure I'm getting that nice consistency. I use the paintbrush to apply the paint, and then I use the roller to smooth it out. And then the handles get the same treatment. It's always good in between coats to put your paintbrush into a bag just to keep the paint on them nice and fresh so they don't go hard. I'm sure there's some fancy contraptions that do this for you, but this bubble wrap bag is doing the job very nicely. And once again, a quick go over with some 120 grit sandpaper, and then a good wipe down with a wet cloth. A little paint touch up on the veneer so it doesn't stick out like a sore thumb. After applying a second coat of paint, I let that dry, and once again I'm going over it with a bit of sandpaper, just feeling for any bumps, sanding them down before I apply my final coat of paint. I always apply quite a thick layer of paint for the last layer, and make sure I use a roller to get that really nice smooth finish. And now just a few finishing touches to wrap this project up. I've really enjoyed filming this and showing you guys a little insight into how I do things. I will endeavour to upload a new video weekly, but in the meantime, if you could please hit the like button and maybe even a subscribe, that would really help with my YouTube venture. But now let's take a look at the final product. I'm really stoked with it, and I hope you enjoy it too. We'll see you next time.